Hello everyone, I'm giving you a quick update on the state of Cardigan Bay, and yesterday I released Cardigan Bay 0.8.0, which you can see here on GitHub. It's also on GitLab in the source form. The source code is on GitLab, but there is a downloader here. So we're going to do the usual thing. I'm going to install it from scratch to see what that looks like. I'm going to tell you a bit about these changes and show you where we are. So the first thing to do is to come to this page here. If you're on the Cardigan Bay GitHub site, you just come here on the right to where I'm putting the mouse on releases, or this button here. It's come down, download the zip file, and I'm just going to put it onto the desktop. Which we can open here. Just going to extract everything onto the desktop for the purpose of this demonstration. So Cardigan Bay, as you may or may not know, it's kind of inspired by a wiki, the wiki tradition, wiki engine. Although it's a program you run on your local machine, it still runs as a little web server and you access it through the browser. So when you've unzipped that file, you're going to see this thing that just says Cardigan. Now, Cardigan Bay, it's all here in this jar file, the entire code. There's no need to have anything else on your machine installed except Java. You do need Java installed. You don't need to have any other frameworks or systems or anything like this. It's a wiki. All the data is stored in this directory called Bedrock by default, and you'll see that it's in markdown files. You can change where this points to somewhere else if you prefer. You also just get these two other files, go.bat, go.sh. Go.sh is for Linux, go.bat is for Windows. If you were to look inside that, you would see that it's literally just Java -jar and then running the jar file. You don't really care about that. All we have to do is double click this. And the first thing it's going to say is like Windows is protecting your computer. It's because this is not signed by Windows. I've not officialized in any way. But if you trust me, and obviously if you want to try this, you're going to need to trust me, but it's a fairly innocuous piece of software. You click this more information and you just say run it. Yes, it is all in Portuguese because my machine was bought in Brazil. So you run it and it's going to bring up this window here, and it's going to give you a little bit of information about what it's doing. Important thing, it says here, welcome to Cardigan Bay. It's created the card server. It's telling you what the name is. It's telling you, okay, by default it's just saying that the published URL is example.com. The start page is hello world. That's the kind of initial page in it. And we're going to run on port 4545. That's the only really important thing to check here. Excuse me. That's the only really important thing to check on this thing, is so you can see where we are. And in fact, all of this could be customizable with either arguments on the command line or now on this new version with a config file. But this is the default, so by default it's looking inside this Bedrock directory. And this Bedrock directory has come with a whole set of pages which are a mixture of documentation and just sort of things to help you get started. So now we're back in our browser, and we're now just going to open up a page called localhost, and it's 4545, that's where we went. So we go there. So this is now your first look at Cardigan Bay running, and you'll see that the wiki defaults to this page called hello world. That can be changed if you want, although there are some issues doing that at the moment, so it's not currently recommended or entirely supported. So hello world is your start page in Cardigan Bay, and there are a whole lot of pages already defined for you. You'll see that the top menu has sort of been shrunk a bit, now moved up to here. We've got our backwards and forwards buttons, just like the browser's own backwards and forwards buttons. Hello world brings you back to this front page. We've got an in queue. We've got a transcript link now. That's a new feature recent. We've got the recent changes page. which shows you the last edited pages and the dates they're edited. We've got a help page over here. This button, this link here, used to be export all the pages in the wiki. It's now changed. It now exports just the pages listed in the recent changes. So the way you run this is you run this as your local notebook on your local machine. It's completely private. It's not, nothing is on a cloud. It's all running locally. If you want to make something public, what you do is you export the pages as flat HTML pages and just host those on your site. So it's a kind of flat site builder effectively. And of course, you can customize your own HTML template and your own CSS for that. It used to be we'd export all the pages when you click this link here. There is still a way of doing that, but once you've got a large wiki, I mean my one is about 6,000 pages, that does take a couple of minutes. So rather, you've got a recent changes list here. What are the most recent pages that got changed? And the export recent changes by default here just does that. This is what we call the nav bar, but it can actually do a bunch of things. You can either you can type in the name of a page like this, hello world, and the button now says view it. We thought that was a slightly more understandable for people who are new to this. It just means go to that hello world page. So that's another way of navigating around. We can follow links, such as following the links to the release notes. We can hit the back button to come back, or hit the forward button to go forward again. Or if we put in the name of a page, let's say recent changes, we can just go there directly. Or we can search for something. Let's say we want to find all the pages that contain the word hello. Okay, it is case sensitive, so let's ask for all the pages that contain the capital hello. And you'll see it says on the transcript now, the transcript is like any interactions you do, which it just needs to print something out, they all go onto this transcript. It's just like the kind of place for it to put all the static stuff, and it sort of hangs around over the session. But you'll see this search now returns two sorts of things. It does a search for this term hello within any page name. So obviously there's a hello world page. There are no other pages that contain that, whose names contain that. But there are 9 pages that actually contain the text hello. So obviously most of those are just pages that themselves contain links back to hello world, like this one here. And if we ever want to go back and look at the transcript, we just click the transcript at the top. We return to the page we're viewing. So various things can appear on this transcript, including search results. There are other ways of searching as well. Let's return to the page view. Up here in the nav bar, we've done view it and find it, so the searching. It also has got a closure interpreter in here, so we can just put in something like apply plus to range 10. Okay, that looks a bit complicated, but I'm just showing the thing. Let's just do something more simple. You know, we can add 2 plus 3 if we want, so we'll click the run it button. Again, the transcript pops up, and there you can see we've done the calculation 2 plus 3, and the result is 5. This is closure using the small closure interpreter. So we can do things like apply plus to the range 100, run that, and it will do more sophisticated calculations. So that's one of several ways we've got of using closure within Cardigan Bay. So this here at the top is our newly styled, or it's certainly improved from the last time I made a video about it. It has these 3 features: navigation, search, and running it. We have these links at the top. There's help that's got various useful links in it. So let's now go back, recent changes, look at the release notes and see what's been added. So the first thing to note is if you've been using Cardigan Bay before, there is now, it's the way that the parameters are set up has changed. So just to be clear, there are parameters you need, and if you look at about this wiki page, you'll see like the wiki has got a name, This is the directory that the pages are being stored in. That's our main storage place, is all under here. The default, as I say, is Bedrock hanging under that Cardigan Bay directory that came out of the zip file. You can point Cardigan Bay at any directory you like. That's where your pages will be stored. It detects that's not currently a Git repository. When you export a flat site from this that you want to use on a real web server, this is just the root. I've just got example.com, but really you'll put your own route of where you can find those files online. There is an export directory. Now that is the local directory on your machine where the exported flat files are going to be put. Typically they go under the exported subdirectory of your Bedrock or your pages directory. So the pages that you're working on live in one directory. Under the exported directory, underneath that is where the output of your thing goes, and that's where you'll copy up to your server. It also just counts the number of pages. There are some various statistics like recent changes, all pages. Something that's new in this one is there is a directory called media also hanging under the Bedrock directory, and that's where if you want to keep files for publication like PDFs or doc files or images that you're going to use, they currently live, or they can live, in this media directory. There's no kind of gallery or real way of managing that yet in Cardigan Bay. You have to put those manually into that directory. But now we can at least click this button here and see the media files page, and this card here has got an actual listing of those files. So currently there's just the standard Cardigan Bay image. We can open that in a new tab here. And there's a file I just added to demonstrate called hello world, or hello.txt. Just says hello teenage America. So that's new in 0.8.0, this media files. In fact, it's a card type, so if you edit it, you'll see it's the system card type, and it's a new command. If you remember, if you've ever seen Cardigan Bay before, there are other commands that you can send, other card in the system card type. There are other commands. For example, recent changes is itself a system card whose command is recent changes. So this is one way you can this is one way of sending system commands to Cardigan Bay. The results turn into cards. And just if you haven't seen this before, obviously you're in a page called recent changes here, and here you can see an edit and an export button. Edit just switches you into this edit mode. What you'll see now is, just because there was confusion before, all of that stuff up the top for navigating around disappears at this point. So you can only way out of here is you either choose to save your changes or cancel. Let's just go to the sandbox and look a bit more at some editing here. So this is just the place to test some things. We can edit this. You'll see cards, as always, separated by these horizontal dashes. In fact, now you can have as many horizontal dashes as you like. Still acts as a card separator. Cards that have a different type, like this one here, have the type written with a colon something. So like evalMD, that is evaluate closure on the server, out, and expect the output to be marked down. So here is just a simple string function. We've just here we're just adding the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 together. We are then using string to concatenate these three hashes on the front. When we save that card, as you'll see, is evaluated to being a 15. That's the number, but it's also a heading. Right? That's what the three hashes did. As before, you've got the usual things there. Okay, so here's the next thing to look at. One of the other things you got is a closure workspace. So here is a way of, let's forget that for a minute. I'm defining a function that takes two arguments, x and y. I multiply the two x's together, so it's square the x, square the y, and then add the sum together. I now call that function with the arguments 2 and 3. If I want to run this, I click the run button, and the result appears down here. That's something we've had in earlier versions of Cardigan Bay. And obviously we can now change these numbers to 8, 6, something like that, rerun it. So this is a live workspace for evaluating closure code, and you can write fairly, you can write longer pieces of closure than that. We have an example I've shown previously of a sort of simple graphing calculator. However, what's new this time is when I make a change here, if I want to make sure I save that, I can click this Save Changes button here. And now you'll see that when it comes back, the change we made here is in the workspace. We can run it. It's now up to 100. Let's change that again to being 9 and 8, 9 and 9. Run that. 162 is the result. Save the change there. You'll see that 9 is being saved properly. That's new in this version. If we look at the main thing, obviously the workspace card starts off with this code by default. So we can actually start playing around much more interactively with our closure in this closure box here. We can run it. We can show the calculated intermediate function. That's the source code. That's the result. That's just showing the data structure. This calculated button switches on and off here. We can switch off the code if we want to not look at it. We can even switch off the output if you want to do that for any reason. So that's an interactive closure workspace. It's all based on the small closure interpreter that comes with Babashka. So thanks to Bork Dude for that, which is very cool. And yeah, so that's one of the ways that another of the ways we use closure, or two ways in fact. There's server-side closure here. There's closure script or small closure interpreter running in the browser in a workspace, and it's now much easier to save your changes. Before there was a bit of a faff, you had to copy and go and edit the page. Now we've got editing by card. So let's have a look at that now. Here we are still in the sandbox. We've got these various cards. As before, we can obviously shift cards up and down with these two arrows here. So we've got yes we can followed by this page. If I just click the down arrow here, that shifts the order of those two, and I can just keep on shifting. We'll shift it back up again. Haven't got dragging and dropping at the moment, but it's fairly simple to change the ordering of cards. So now we've got on the right hand side this thing called the card bar. When we click this eye, that opens up the card bar. Now that does a bunch of different things, and there's more things than we had previously. So let's look. We've got a card that says yes we can. Now if we open that up, we'll see three things. We'll see the title card bar, and you'll see it's got an ID. It's got this hash. Now the hash is the identity, the real identity of the card. It tells you also what the markdown, so the source type and the render type of the card is. That identity is now really important. That's how we know which card we're talking about, and it's a hash of the content of the card. So if you change the content, the ID of the card changes. That's quite a hard correspondence then between what a card contains and how Cardigan Bay knows to talk about it. There are reasons for that probably are not, it's not really important it does it that way at the moment, although you should be aware of it, because if you edit a card, you've got to know that its ID will change, and then other things you do with it might be affected by that. But let's just do some standard stuff. We might want to move this card to a different page. So one thing we could do is let's just move it to something called Sand 2 for a second. You just type in the name of a new page here. You click the send button. You've now moved to Sand 2. That page didn't exist previously, so at this point it was automatically created. And you can see that yes we can has now been moved to it. I'm just going to get rid of, click the edit here, get rid of that stuff at the top which we didn't need. So we just got that thing here. If we go back, you'll see that obviously it's moved, it's left sandbox. Now, what's new in this version is a reliable version of transclusion. So what I mean by transclusion, I mean we can take a card from one page and show it on another page, even though the card is living. So it's a good way of, let's say, sharing. Suppose you've got a diagram you need to share amongst a number of different pages. Rather than copy and repeat it everywhere, or let's say you've got a block of text, you can just say, in this case, we're sort of going to quote a card from one page in another page. But it's a live quotation, right? So that's why it's called a transclusion. So if we come to this card we've now got on Sand 2, we open our card bar again, we go to the hash and we just click the hash. That's actually copied a transclude card for this card onto the clipboard. So we can close that up again and we can click back. We can now go to the sandbox, and here at this point, let's say I want to transclude that to the beginning. I've got it on my clipboard. I just paste it in like that. And now you'll see it's a card of type transclude. It's from Sand 2 and it's of that ID. That's the ID of the card. If you click save, you'll see now it says transcluded from Sand 2, and here is the card that got transcluded. I'm still thinking a bit about, I need a way of showing things are transcluded, and I'm just sort of, I have a few questions exactly how I'm going to represent that. So at the moment we've just got a title in one card, and then the following card is what's transcluded. And as you can see, that yes we can is not on the sandbox page. All that's on the sandbox page is a card of type transclude with the ID of the card we're transcluding. And of course we can go back to it, it's still here. And if we were to now say, this is the card we transcluded from Sand 2, and we save that, and we now come back here, and what you will see is actually it's disappeared. And why has it disappeared? Because it's changed its identity. Now that's something to note at this version of Cardigan Bay. Ideally we'll handle that in a slightly more clever way, but at the moment that's what we do. So we've got to go here and we've got to grab that again, come back, edit this, and we will now replace it with the new transclusion. And now it says this is the card we transcluded from Sand 2. Transclusions don't have to be just one card. Let's edit this thing here. And so I say another card from Sand 2. Now let's get that one. In this case, in fact, we are going to, well, let's just replace that for a second. Save that. We've just now got the other card from Sand 2. If we go to Sand 2 again, we open this one, and we just, at this point, we just actually want this number. We don't want to copy the whole thing. Come back, edit here, do that, and now you'll see we've transcluded both cards. So a transclude card can include a list of IDs, so we can actually get more than one card out of Sand 2. So that's the state of transclusion. Previously there was a version of transclusion, but it wasn't officially supported because it was buggy. It's pretty robust now. It works with all the other card types. We had a problem before where you couldn't transclude a card that contained an embedded video or something. Now that seems to be working okay. If on let's say if we wanted to transclude this workspace back onto card, we grab that here, we go to our Sand 2, and then we just add that there. Now we've transcluded from the sandbox page the entire workspace. Still runs. If you come back here, obviously that doesn't appear, but we are still transcluding these two cards. So transclusion is fairly robust now, and it is quite a useful way of repeating things across cards. The fact that every time you change the content of a card means you've got to recreate the transclusion link is obviously not ideal. But there are reasons for doing it that way, and the main reason for doing that way is that you would like to be sure what you're transcluding. Eventually, there's a sort of goal here that we will be able to transclude from other people's servers, and you probably want to only transclude things you really know what they are. So you don't want to transclude something and then have somebody else changing it later on and you not realizing it, particularly if those things contain code. So it's a sort of security feature. It's not really relevant yet, but the decision to make the ID of cards be the hash of their content was taken now in order to be ready for that situation in the future. And like I say, it's a sort of debatable question. Not 100% sure if it's the right solution or it's the right way of going about things, but it might be, and it's the one that we're going with right now. If you are interested in Cardigan Bay and you've got strong opinions that it shouldn't work like that, and you're interested in getting involved in the coding, or even just as a user, and you want to tell me that, I will be very interested to know, because these are the sorts of things that, obviously, the more feedback from other users, the better. So let's go back to our recent changes and look about our release notes. So we've talked about the config file. I'm not going to talk about the config file this time. It's only really going to be problematic for you if it's only going to be an issue for you if you've been using Cardigan Bay already and didn't have that. It probably won't make any difference to your setup anyway, but it's good for you to know that just going into this is a subdirectory of the page directory called system config.adn. That's where any extra config information lives. So we've now done transclusion. That was actually in 7.4. The workspace saving, media directory card. Let's have a look at card level editing. So go back to our sandbox again. Edit this. I'm going to get rid of all that transclusion. We don't need it at the moment. But we do have card level editing. So I can come in here, and as you can see, the card, this page for experimenting with There's also a way of editing it down here. So this is a page for experimenting with markup and things. I can now edit it in the card bar. This whole area is called the card bar here. And I can just save it directly from there, and then you'll see that now I can now edit it in the card bar has appeared there. So I'm very committed to this edit button here in this edit box. There's always going to be a canonical single text box version of an entire page. That's always been a very important criteria for me. But of course it's convenient sometimes to be able to get into a particular card and edit it directly. And so now you can. This one here, this was a card of type evalMD. At this point we don't have to worry because it already knows what type it is, but we might just change the code. So instead of make it a string stars, let's just make it a italicized, and let's just make the numbers 1 to 6, and we'll put the other thing to close the italics there. There you go, that's now 21 in italics. Again, we can edit directly in the card bar. So that's what we mean by card level editing here. It means any card can be edited directly underneath it. Release notes here can be edited like that. Workspace saving, media directory. Finally, network cards are still an experimental feature. I'm working on a way of sort of drawing little diagrams, boxes and arrows, network diagrams. This is something I had in an old piece of software of mine. I quite like it. I've not had it in this until now. Test network. So I used to say ignore this page. Here is a simple network diagram. It looks nicer than it used to. Hello world, Cardigan Bay. Hello world to thought storms. Hello world to recent changes, RSS. If you here you are on the test network page. If you click this, it obviously navigates to the Hello World page. And if you click back, so these are diagrams with little titles of pages in them that you can start building. Well, you can use for anything you like, really. Recent changes will take you to the recent changes page. So it's just another way of navigating around. This is SVG that's generated on the server. Cardigan Bay will take you to the Cardigan Bay page. So this is not yet. It's here, and the diagram looks okay at this point. If you were to edit this, what you'll notice is that, well, okay, I'm going to come up here. It's a card of type colon network, and it's just the data structure. So I am working on a graphical editor for this. The graphical editor is not included in this version 0.8.0. It's actually working in development, and it will be out fairly soon, I hope, but it wasn't ready for this release, and I decided that at this point was not the time to worry about it. But basically you can see that the data structure behind the scenes is just a map. It's got a nodes and an arcs part. The nodes are just these the ID of the node, the text that is in fact the link, plus the coordinates, and the arcs is just a list of which things are connected to which things. So you can change this. If I wanted to change the title of this to being Sandbox, obviously I can. It's now Sandbox. It's a link to Sandbox. But yeah, most people are not going to want to edit their diagrams like that. I mean, I've done it in the past for my scenes. But there is a graphical editor in the works, and I do hope you'll see it soon. Not there yet. So let's get back to our release notes. This is what was new then in 0.8.0. Config file, card level editing. I think that was really big and really important point. I didn't, I always knew that it was coming at some point, but I didn't think it was an urgent thing, to be honest. But now I've got it, I'm using it heavily, so it is clearly an important thing to have. The workspace saving, I think, is very important. I think it transforms your relationship with those closure script workspaces. And network cards, that's really just a hint of what's to come. Not necessarily ready to use yet if you don't want to manually edit them by hand. Media directory cards, quite useful to see what you've got in your media directory. And you can see from the previous release notes, well, the transclusion stuff. We just go to the transclusion example page. What you'll see here is, of course, we've got pictures can be transcluded. Patterns and patterning. If you haven't seen this before, patterning is a library for producing these sort of pictures like this, for creating in code these quite nice patterns of various sorts. This is all executed on the server. You can see we can get quite sophisticated here using the patterning library, which has got functions for doing a lot of this stuff here. This shows you the cards that have got patterns in. They'll show you the code. Up to things like this, quite complex. We've got L systems that are in the library, so you can make these little sort of plant shaped things. I mean, you can see this is a sort of chessboard with plants on it. We could make that a lot. Let's just edit the code so we have fewer of the squares, and have where is that? Code for that is 14. Yeah. Yeah. So these are large. So you can see these are L system based things in the middle. We created this knot type pattern. The knot type pattern was drawn by this function here. So yeah, closure again to produce those images. Coming back here, though, you'll see that those go through transclusion perfectly well. This one does. Obviously, we didn't change the content of this card. Video embedding. This is a card that embeds YouTube, but actually it's now being transcluded from this page that demonstrates videos being embedded with this, like embed YouTube, etc. card. One other thing to notice for the editing now, let's get back to our sandbox for a second as well. When we hit this edit button, we now get this copy bar up here. So this is just convenient for certain things that you might need to not have either on your keyboard. Like, for example, for me, I don't have a pound on this keyboard, pound sign. So I just put a button that copies that to the clipboard. I can then paste it in. Let's say doing page names, this is the internal link. So that's kind of more useful when I'm using this on a tablet or something. It's kind of hard to get at some of these other things. Click this copy bar again and you'll get the standard things for like a YouTube video. Copies that to the clipboard, paste that in there. It used to be that these buttons pasted it directly, but that meant you were selecting the position to paste and then pressing the button, which was actually confusing to people. So I had users complaining about that. So I've moved it to you click the button, it copies it to the clipboard. So that's the YouTube embed card. That's a SoundCloud embed card here. Stuff that's kind of hard to remember. If you want to remember how to do an RSS feed embed card, type in the URL there. They're all parameters sent to this embed card type. And then finally up here with copy bar 2 is a whole lot of closure. So you're in a closure workspace. But let's say I'm working on some closure here and I would like to say define a function or something. I can click here, I can find my deafen, paste that in, and now it's given me, again, the sort of syntax is convenient here. I could say function of x times x, and now just say f of 10, save that. That's changed. Obviously we can run that here. So there are, at this point, various pieces of closure structure, cond expressions. Again, this is most useful if you're thread first macros. This is useful if you're on a tablet or phone because it's hard to get at a lot of those things without like that. So I think that's pretty much everything now you can see in Cardigan Bay, and I hope you check it out, and I hope you can see that we are making progress. This started with some basic ideas and some functionality. I started it ugly. I wanted to get certain ideas sorted, and I wanted to get certain functionality sorted. As I come to say, I actually run my own wiki, like 6,000 pages. I'm using this software every day. It's very, very dog-fooded. So there are things that are a bit weird that don't look as slick as perhaps they ought to, but it's usable and it is being worked on quite a lot, and it's getting more and more. The slickness is being introduced. It's started very ugly. It's still not beautiful yet. It's still not as much of that kind of ideal hypercard, small talk like live environment as I'm really aiming for. But it is wiki into which you can put running code. So just see where we've got our workspaces here. The example I like to show, graphing example. This is some code in a workspace for a little graphing calculator. If we run that, it will draw a graph. We can change the function that we're passing to it. We could make that mod x7. Rerun it. Get a different function coming out there. This is a place for doing and publishing real work. At the end of the day, then when you've made your little widget like this, when you hit that export button up here, it will give you a flat HTML page, but one that does include the a small closure interpreter. So this will become a live interactive widget on your in your flat HTML page that you've exported. So that can go online. So we're kind of, the vision that I've got here, the vision is definitely we're advancing on that vision. The idea is that you've got a really convenient workspace. It's your notebook for your notes about anything you like. Well, something that's also standard in Cardigan Bay is this bookmarklet. You can take this thing called bookmark this, where you can take that, drag it up to your bookmark bar. Let's just call it my wiki for a second. Save that up here. Now let's say I'm looking at something I've just today was looking at Jack Clark. He's from Anthropic AI. He's got a blog post. Let's say it's about this model from Huawei. Let's say I want to keep a copy of that. I've now got my bookmarklet. All I have to do is click there, and you'll see that my in queue is now opened, and that bookmark was captured at this point. So I can go in, I could change how I want to say. This is about Huawei's new language model. Now, I don't have pages about language model in this demonstration version, but if I did, I would have that there. I can click that. It doesn't exist yet. On my real wiki, it does. Now, let's say I wanted to move that into a page called AI News. I can put it there. I can send that off. I've now created a page called AI News. Forget that for a second. Save that. And here we are. I'm now making a page called AI News. I might think to myself, actually, I'd like Jack Clark. No, actually, let's say this tweet here. Okay. He's saying what he's been working on Anthropic AI. I can put that in the wiki as well. That's embedded that tweet. Now I'm going to send that off to AI News as well. Send that there. And you'll see AI News now has that and that. So you can sort of snapshot certain things. Let's just do another one. Let's say I went to YouTube. And I put in AI News. Let's just find out what AI News there is on YouTube today. I mean, AI News is evolving all the time.
The release of GPT.
Is GPT-4 going to be artificial general intelligence? I'm not entirely convinced by that, but I'm interested, so I'm going to put that in the wiki as well. As you can see, it's come out as an embedded video. I'll put that in AI News. Send that off. So you can start gathering things you find online, send them off, put them in pages very quickly. And as you say, we've got embedded tweets, we've got embedded video. Again, if you export this, you're going to get a flat page with all this stuff embedded in it. So we're coming on. This tool is a tool for thought. It's a tool for, it's a notebook for your ideas. It's a notebook for ideas that can be, sometimes you want to put a little code algorithm in, or, you know, a little model. Yeah, the programming here is not yet, this is not an IDE by any stretch of the imagination, but as a system, a tool for thought for making a notebook, for publishing this as a flat site, for embedding various media types, it's getting there. So thanks for watching this quite long video.